Say hello to my daughter, who's here this very exciting day, first time she's heard me read. Louisa. Everybody, Allie. Not trying to embarrass you girls or anything? Okay, so this is the first story I ever wrote in my MFA program at UMass Boston. It's called Reckless Operation. When it happened, Linda was driving to see a doctor. She was late. The appointment was with a fertility specialist who was in high demand among the barren women of northern New Jersey. Though Linda wasn't barren, or hadn't been, she'd gotten pregnant with Annie, now 4, with no problem. But this fall marked 2 years of trying for another, and nothing was happening. Secondary infertility, they called it, the inability to get pregnant more than once. It would be convenient if we lived in China, her husband said. Linda was beginning to suspect that Joe didn't care whether they had a second child. At times she wondered if she wanted one herself. Annie's preschool had just bumped up to 4 mornings a week, and Linda was enjoying her renewed freedom. She'd started yoga and finished a novel in the space of a week. Another baby meant going backward to sleepless nights, dirty diapers, and those high chair feedings that went on forever. But she wanted Annie to have a sibling. Maybe that was because she was so close to her sister Paula. As kids, they'd shared a room and everything else. The way Linda remembered it, growing up with Paula was like a slumber party every night. She decided to call the doctor's office and say she was on her way. She blamed early morning traffic. She found her cell phone in the pocket of her jacket and pressed the contact list, holding the phone low in her lap to scroll through. The last thing she needed was to get pulled over, and the cops in this town were known as real sticklers. She considered risking it, then shoved the phone deep between her legs and reached onto the floor of the passenger seat for the Bluetooth she was pretty sure she'd put in her purse. For a number of seconds she could not determine later. Her eyes were trained on the dashboard while her right hand was inside the bag. She felt her wallet, her makeup pouch, crumpled receipts, no Bluetooth. She yanked the leather strap to pull the bag into her lap, but it was caught on the lever that moved the seat back. She leaned farther across the seat and down, digging into the bag one more time before she attempted to disentangle the strap from the thin metal bar. When the crash came, it was fast and hard, as if she'd hit a wall. Her head lurched forward toward the floor of the car, then she swung herself fast back into the driver's seat. Somehow the bag came with her. She could see whatever she'd hit on her windshield, a blur of pink and white. Linda pressed her foot to where the brake should be, but missed. She scrambled her feet, frantic. When she finally managed to stop the car, the blur was behind her, having been thrown into the air and over the roof. Not a person, her mind screamed, recalling the pink. She knew she had to move, to get out of the car and see what she'd done. But she felt frozen in place. A man jumped out of the car and ran past her. "Are you okay?" He was yelling and waving a phone. "I called 911. Linda turned to see the man huddled down next to something in the road. Someone she could see now. It had to be a person. What else? Oh my God, she had not been watching the road. By now a small crowd had gathered. Sirens screamed. It sounded as if they were coming from every direction. Then a police officer with a steely gray crew cut was pulling her door wide open. "Bartlett," said the silver nameplate on his chest. "You okay, ma'am?" She nodded, unable to speak. The officer locked eyes with the second cop at his side. "Step out of the car, please." Linda climbed out. Her legs felt like cement. Her purse fell from her lap to the ground, its contents spilling all over the street. The cop dropped to his knees and scooped it all up with big hands. She stared at her windshield, at the spiderweb cracks in the glass. She willed herself to look at the scene in the road. 2 ambulances were already parked at odd angles in the road. Other cops and several young men in white were forcing the crowd back and surrounding the victim. Victim, the word filled Linda's head. She tried to speak. "I didn't see, I don't know what." Then all at once she was crying, big braying sobs. The cop reached for her arm. "Please, ma'am, sit back down." He eased her back into the driver's seat and waited. "Who was it?" Linda said when she caught her breath. "It was a woman," the cop said, "elderly from the looks of it, probably out for a walk." "Will she be okay?" The cop shook his head. "We don't know. They're doing everything they can." He leaned down to meet her eyes. "We're going to have to ask you some questions." She nodded, then started crying all over again. This is what it means to be hysterical, she thought. "Is there someone you want to call?" the cop said. She wasn't sure. "My husband?" "Okay, you have a phone?" The phone. Yes. She remembered shoving its smooth metal between her legs. If she'd just called the doctor and not bothered looking for the Bluetooth, this wouldn't have happened. And why had she needed to call the doctor at all? She was late either way. Now she'd never get to the appointment. The selfish thought nearly made her gasp. Why don't you give your husband a call? She nodded and closed her eyes, willing the police to walk away. They must have, because when she opened her eyes again, they were gone and she was alone. She found the phone beneath her on the seat, then called Joe and told him what she'd done. Even with the siren from what must have been the third ambulance, why would they need more than one? She heard his sharp inhale. He said he was on his way. That was all. When Joe arrived, the cops came back. The one named Bartlett asked her to describe what happened as best as she could remember. The other cop took notes on a form while she spoke. She told them she'd taken her eyes off the road for just a moment to look for something in her bag. They asked if she'd been on her cell phone at the time. She said she hadn't been, and Joe looked relieved. The first cop handed her a ticket for something called reckless operation. Since you admitted taking your eyes off the road, he said. He told her she'd probably have to pay a $100 fine. That's it, she said? That's all? He nodded and put his citation pad in his back pocket.